Hey, hi everybody. My name is George Evenson, and we're going to have a day today when we're going to go back and review some of the experiences that we've had. All three of us were born and raised in Sevastopol. We've known each other since the beginning. And between the three of us, we've got something like 275 years or 65 years experience around here when you combine it. And so I think it's unusual to get the people that have been around this township this long. That's nearly half of the life of the township that we've been here. And we've seen so many changes in the past years of our life, and it's and we want to talk about some of the good old times and the bad old times. And today we're at Don Petersilke's house, and with us today is today is 4th of April in 2009. And we've got with me here today is Don Petersilke and Charlie Jarman. So Don, you got something to say to introduce yourself?
How do you do? I'm Don Petersilke. I lived here for, well, a pretty long time, I guess. I'll be 80 in spring. Another month, in fact. Spring is here. But I lived in this area quite a while, about as long as George. We farmed right in back here, and we farmed back in the years. We had all farmed here, the three of us. All went through that, and our folks were farmers, and we still remember all the good old days.
Well, Charlie
I'm
Jarman?
Charlie Jarman. I've been here all my life, of course, and like I always tell people, I never went any place. I just stayed here in Sebastopol and made a living here.
Didn't get there.
My grandfather originally came here from Gibraltar Township in the Greenwood area. They moved down here because they felt there was less stones down here and there was better land for farming. They bought the place where we're on now because there was some good hardwood timber on that, and they felt they could make some money by hauling the logs or the firewood to town. And they did for quite a while to supplement their income and to pay the mortgage.
So why don't we begin with some of your earliest memories of our farm life, and then we can go on into some of our school years. So Charlie, why don't you start some of your early memories of farm life and your starting into school?
Well, from what I remember, every place had some cows. There was a farm on every corner practically, and in any place there was a house, there was also cows. Sometimes a cherry orchard and stuff like that, and that shaped my life quite a bit, the early cherry orchard years, in that we would go up to Wabeno and get some Native American people to come and pick cherries for us. So I got exposed at early times to Native American people and their customs and the way they worked.
Yeah, you got anything to say about that, Bud?
Well,
cherries.
Yeah, we had cherries, and we worked cherries, and I guess my grandpa owned the cherry orchard at that time, and that's when the war started, the war years, and it brought the big price up on cherries at 10 cents a pound. And boy, we sounded like all them cherry growers were getting rich. Man, they were hauling in the dough. And you didn't need much of an orchard either, and boy, there was some pretty good checks coming. But then we hit the bad years, the checks didn't come either, and finally most of the orchards went down. Yeah. But now I see that there's an awful lot of cherries coming back, especially up in the northern part, Sister Bay and Ephraim through that area. And there's an awful lot of cherry, and I believe someday that they'll make a comeback, which for a while there was nothing no more as far as cherry. Everybody was pulling them out.
Yeah.
The 20 acres I live on here, I bulldozed all out.
Yeah.
Planted pine trees now are in it, and we gave up on the cherries because they were just nothing. You lost money. If you had an orchard, you lost money.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'll
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
that, George.
Oh yeah, yeah. We had about 20 acres of cherries, and we had a pickers camp. And well, at first we didn't because the trees were small, so we get all the neighbor kids to come over and pick cherries. You know, geez, 11 cents a pail they were getting, you know, for picking, and that busheled up after.
George, you made more money. I remember 4 cents a pail.
4 cents a pail.
4 cents a pail,
You
as I
guys-
remember.
You guys, that was too cheap.
You
should have paid 11.
overpaid. You'd have made more money if you...
But we had we had the neighbor kids would come over and pick, and finally though it got to the point where you know there weren't so many neighbor kids anymore, so then we would get we'd get people, we'd get Mexican families, and we didn't have any Native Americans, but we had Mexican families, and we had families from down south, and one of the kids that I remember particularly, we had a camp there, and these little kids would come out of, well, they were kind of, we call them hillbillies, but the 2 little kids were sitting outside the pickers camp door having a tobacco spitting contest. So they were a little different, you know, but they were good workers. But then we always had the fun of going up to the cherry factory, you know, and lining up at the truck and talking to all the neighbors about what's going on and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, there was right after the war, and it was kind of an interesting story about that because I remember there was 1946 and 1947, and a little bit into 1948. The cherries were all the way up to something like 16 cents a pound.
Yeah, they were.
And we had the biggest crop in history.
Yeah.
Something like Door County, I think 40 million pounds of cherries. And so we, that year, there was such good money in it that a lot of farm mortgages got paid off that had been in a mortgage for the whole Depression.
Yep, I remember that.
And then after that, after the mortgage was paid off, a lot of people would buy trucks, new trucks. They'd buy 46 and 47 trucks. And I noticed there were some of them 46 and 47 trucks were still around in the 1960s because they never had any good years after that.
I tell you
And there
why.
might still be a couple of them around.
Yeah, I'll
But,
tell you why, George. Because that 16 cents that you mentioned and the 10 cents that Donnie mentioned, I bought an orchard and some land from his grandfather, and they were quoting us a price of, I think, was 14 cents a pound, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, when the harvest come, got down to 9.5 cents a pound, and some of that we didn't even get paid for because the
Processor.
the packers just defaulted on what we were owed, and so it made it kind of tough going sledding there for a few years.
You bet.
But I still may be older than you guys. I remember back when at the cherry orchard in the morning, here a truck come from Reynolds Brothers, the packing place, with all German prisoners on it.
Oh my.
Oh, yeah.
And we had German prisoners,
Oh yeah.
war prisoners,
Yeah.
help pick our cherries. I
Oh,
think there
yeah.
was, I don't know if there was 30 or 50, I don't remember, that used to come. You could contract them from the fruit from
Yeah.
Reynolds Brothers.
sure.
Yeah.
And we talked to them guys a lot. They come and they had a guard with them. The guy carried a gun,
Oh, yeah.
a rifle with him, and he
Yeah.
was the guard. He wouldn't do nothing. He'd just sit there. Well, they weren't going to run away. They were the best cherry pickers you could find. And they were all people, you talk to them, they'd show you pictures of their families, their
Yeah.
wife and the kids,
Yeah.
and they couldn't wait to get back home. And they were really treated good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell you that. They
they-
all stayed together up by Reynolds,
Yeah.
and they had a big snow fence around, and they all lived in that
Yeah.
camp.
There was some over at the fairgrounds too.
Yeah, they
The
sure
Corp
there
had
was.
them, but
Yeah.
I remember one time we had a crew of them out in the orchard, and my mother was out there taking in the pails, you know, and the guard would always stand around the check-in site.
Yeah.
So one day this guard and this German guy were talking together, and it amounted to the conversation, well, let me see your gun, the prisoner said to
Hand
the
it
guard.
to him.
So my mother was sitting there. This guard handed this
The guy-
looked like a Thompson submachine gun.
Yeah.
Well, my mother was just terrified. She never got over that till her dying day. But
There probably was no bullets in it.
Probably not.
oh,
Probably wasn't.
that was really something. But they were all nice fellows, and some of them actually came back to North
Yeah,
County
they came back
after the war.
after the war and made their
And I
homes
remember
back.
Margaret's grandpa, he was a German, second generation German, and he'd get him, he could talk to him, and he'd buy tobacco. They like to get this
Yeah.
chewing tobacco
Yeah.
and cigarettes and that kind of stuff. And yeah, that was kind of interesting. That cherry industry, though, that was, that was all you talked about in
All
the
you
spring.
talked about.
People in January were out cutting buds, February cutting buds to see if
You're going to have a crop or not.
I remember there was a guy who he was such a pessimist, and my dad's name was Louis, and this guy's name was Henry. Well, anyway, Henry and Louis were visiting, and so Henry would come out in the winter time and visit, and he said, "Well, it looks like the cherries are all shot. There's no cherries this year." Well, it got to be spring, and the cherries would open up a little bit. Then he said, "Well, I don't think they're going to pollinate this year. We've had too much bad weather." And then after that, it got closer to picking time. We're not going to get any pickers this year. Well, we got them picked. I don't think we're going to get paid.
Finally,
And by the time the season, we finally got paid and everything. It was January, and they had to start over again.
Start over.
But it was always so downbeat.
yeah.
But what about going to school? You remember about the school? Your
Oh,
local school?
jeepers. Yeah, it was a good school. We couldn't wait until we get out of it that we could get over to Sevastopol, the school, the big school. We could get away from the nuns, because they were pretty tough to work for. But
Yeah.
then we went to the high school, and well, then we met more. There was a chance to meet more kids and get in a bigger school and get into sports, which was pretty nice. But we had a lot of times. I was telling George before that I remember one year I rode on the sleigh bus, and I imagine there are a lot of people that don't remember the sleigh bus in Sevastopol no more. It had a little wood stove in the middle of the bus, and they pulled it with horses and go right across the field because the roads were too full of snow. So that's how we got to school for a couple of years. And I remember that, and the kids sure had a heck of a good time. And then we went to the old school bus with the wheels on. Well, then we'd get stuck in the mud all the time. And we always had to laugh. The bus driver, which was Fuzzy Hain, he'd say, "Get out, kids, and push." And when we all got out, we'd hold back the bus instead of pushing it, because we know we were going to go to school early. So we had a lot of good times. And
Yeah, yeah.
From
Kids
there
haven't
on-
changed much, have they?
no. And from there on, we all thought that they were crazy when they talked about blacktopping the townships and getting blacktop. We couldn't believe it. But old Frank Forrest, I guess he was the main guy.
He was the guy.
We'd be
Yeah, he
still
was.
driving the gravel roads. It wasn't for old. He was town chairman, wasn't he, George?
Yeah.
He was town
Yeah,
chairman.
Charlie, he was town chairman, and
Yeah.
a good one too.
Yeah.
You
You know,
all talk good of him.
I was at the town meeting when they passed this idea of
Really?
blacktopping all the roads in Sevastopol. They were going to do all the roads. It's only a couple of short pieces we're going to do, and it was $150,000. They blacktopped all the roads in Sevastopol. I kid you not. And people were thinking, "My God, how can we afford $150,000?"
We'd never afford that.
But they said, well, the reason you're doing that is because you're going to save it on the school buses, because the roads were like washboards. Those old gravel roads, they wouldn't get graded often, and they were like washboards. The buses, they got shook apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't blacktop a mile for that.
No,
for that
no,
price.
they wouldn't
What
get
a
the thing out of the garage. But
a
yeah,
difference.
that was a big thing, and Bank of Sturgeon Bay that time, Cliff Herlies was involved, and they borrowed the money to the town at 4%, and that was a pretty good deal at that time.
Yeah.
But We got all the roads blacktop, and I think we're the first township in the county to have all the roads blacktop.
Yeah, I
We were
believe
way
it.
ahead of them.
Yeah.
Of course, Sebastopol's always been way ahead of everybody anyway.
Yes, God, yes, I'm sure of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that why our taxes was so high?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, those were a little different days. You got anything you remember about school, Charles?
Oh, I remember the teachers and that we had. Some I liked, some I didn't like, and things like that. And I never minded going to school because I didn't have too much of a hard time with school. And but I remember that, boy, that building could get cold on a cold day. Especially the grade school.
Yeah.
The wind would blow right through those windows the way it seemed, and
Slow it
it
up a
just
little
it would freeze you to no end. In fact, there was a few days where we didn't have school because they couldn't
just too
keep the
cold,
school
yeah.
school warm.
Yeah, yeah. One night they had a snowstorm. They had a snowstorm, and it was so bad the kids had to stay over in school.
Yeah.
That was it must have been an exciting night.
That wasn't too uncommon. I mean, to stay overnight once in a while in
Yeah.
school, or to get home way or late, you know,
Late,
or
yeah.
the school bus was always late. Snowstorm or something always
Yeah.
made. We'd have our snow days,
Yeah.
and I remember in the old Catholic school yet where I went to, we still had the old outhouses yet. I remember them in the Catholic
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
Sure. Of course, we all had them at home anyway, so we knew what they
Yeah, we
were.
did. Nobody knew what a indoor toilet was. I mean,
no.
it took us a week to learn how to run that little handle on the side.
That's right.
What that was for. But yeah, that was something. You know, people don't realize that, but when electricity came up and down these roads, you know, that was really a big thing. It went past County Trunk P pretty early because they had to get power to Sebastopol schools. Those was like in 1926, something like that. So those and then they get a bad storm, and then those wires would break. And I remember one time in the winter, one of those high falls wires broke, and we had electric fence going around this pasture. And every time that wire would swing, it would hit those electric. All the fence posts were burning all around, and we had the transformer in the house. You know, the thing that makes it click. And sure enough, there was fire there flying out. My dad grabbed that and tore that off the wall. But yeah, then they'd come out and they'd fix the wires, and we, in a day or so we'd have electricity again. But when electricity came, you know, then the power came, and it wasn't long. You had pressure water,
Yeah.
and you couldn't have a toilet in the house unless you had pressure water.
No.
You couldn't have that unless you had electricity.
By God, no, George, I remember on the old farm over here where I was farming, when we moved there, we had a toilet, and the faucets and everything in the toilet, and the toilet worked, but they had a big water tank
Cistern upstairs.
upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we pumped that full,
Yeah.
and then you
Then you'd
flush
have
the
pressure.
toilet from
Yeah.
there. That would give you your pressure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was back a few years
Yeah,
too.
that was back a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people innovated and came up with ideas on how to provide for those things, but most of the people didn't have running water until it got in the later years.
Yeah.
Particularly after the war, it really took off. The Second World War really took off, and things changed.
Then
I
those-
always remember the thrashing days when the machine would come. Bill Simner's machine would come into the neighborhood, and my neighbor across the road would always ask me to help him thrash, and the big lunches, the big dinners, and the big suppers after, and they'd always bring
man.
out a few bottles of beer during the day to help things along a little bit. And
Yeah. Yeah.
then I got a little older, and my uncle asked me to help him. Well, that was more fun because the cousins and us were all together, and
Yeah.
we had a good time at that.
Yeah. Yeah, those were good times. And then, of course, what they'd like to do is get the young fellows to carry bags.
Yeah,
Remember,
yeah.
they'd have wheat that's heavy, you know.
Oh,
And so these big guys would take and throw a bag of wheat up, and you'd land it on your shoulder. Boy,
You sink right to the ground.
You ended up today, he was about 4 inches shorter than you were when you started the day.
I was lucky. I was too small then, too
Yeah,
young
you were
then.
too small. But boy, they just like that. They said, we'll
Oh, yeah.
show this young smart aleck.
Yeah,
a thing or
get them
two,
on the
you know.
bags,
Yeah.
carrying
remember-
bags.
We used to go all around the neighborhood,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and used to work. I remember getting 45 cents an hour
You bet.
for that, you know, and then you get the meals besides.
Yeah.
And you could always depend there'd be good meals.
Oh, God, yes,
Yeah,
you get
every-
fed good.
At least you knew where the good meals were.
Yeah, you
You
knew
know,
where to-
after a couple of
Yeah.
years at it, you found out where the good meals were.
Each farm wife tried to outdo the one
do
before.
that next
Yeah.
one, I think.
Yeah,
Boy,
But
all
it
the
was-
good homemade bread and
Yeah.
stuff
yeah,
that we had,
yeah.
oh, man.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the women would get together, and then they'd work together. And,
Yeah.
But there's
Help
always
each other.
neighbors.
Yeah.
You got to know who your neighbors were.
You always
knew
did.
their ups and downs. They knew, you know, what was going on in the neighborhood, and you knew everybody. But now you don't know anybody. It seems like, I don't know if that's my fault or what, but I mean, people move in and out, and well, so what? You know, that doesn't matter too much.
And there's
Well,
one,
in difficult times, like when a barn burnt or something like that,
Yeah.
the whole neighborhood would get together and help build that barn back
Yeah.
up and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
Or if there was sickness in the family, they would come and either plant the crops or harvest the crops for the
Yeah.
guy
Yeah.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That made a better neighborhood also.
Yeah,
it
Because
did.
they're working together.
We were more
yeah,
together.
you bet
Yeah.
it did.
Yeah, I remember one time the family living across the road from us, they had a lot of kids. And it was during it must have been about in 36 or something like that. They didn't have a telephone. This one little girl, her name was Rosemary, she came down with scarlet fever. And I remember the father coming over, knocking on our door to get the telephone, and doctor came out. Well, in a few days, Rosemary was dead. She didn't last long. But it wasn't unusual, you know, for family members to die back then. I mean,
Yeah.
you take the
Young ones
the
especially.
young ones
Yeah.
especially. Yep. If you got to be 60, the chances were pretty good you'd make it to 70. But there were so many kids that died at birth or within a few years. They get
Yeah.
measles or whooping cough or some disease like that. And polio was a big thing. Oh God, my
Yeah.
mother would worry so about kids getting
Kids
polio.
getting polio.
Because there's no defense against it, you know. Now we don't even think about polio anymore. But that was pretty serious stuff.
Well, they called the fair off one year because of the polio
That's
epidemic.
They did. Yep. I remember that. Yep. You know, going back to school, you know, Charlie, I got to tell a story that you're involved in.
I know what he's coming with.
Anyway, it's the last day of school. And I couldn't go to school that day because I had to stay home and spray the orchard because my dad was working in a shipyard and we had some cherries. And, you know, I was how old were you in 4th grade? In 8th grade, you're about 14, so. Anyway,
Yeah.
I had to stay home and spray the cherries, so I didn't go to school. Well, about 10 o'clock, three guys, my classmates come walking down the road, you know, and they stopped in. And I thought, well, you know, what's going on? Oh, nothing, you know, we're just thought we'd leave for a while. And it wasn't long. You remember C.P. Haberman?
Yes.
He drove in. He walked in the house. He didn't knock or anything. He said, "Are you so-and-so, you so-and-so, you so-and-so?" Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
on, man.
Yeah. Well, you better come with me. Well, what's the matter? Well, it seems as though somebody brought a stick of dynamite to school. and they had this woods out in the back, you know. And so they lit the stick of dynamite and everybody run the other way. Except here comes little Charlie Jarman running down the path. You're lucky you're here, boy. Because you remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
That must have been quite a shock, huh?
Well, I had my hand on the door when it went off.
Oh, you got past.
Yeah.
You got past it.
We
but
used
anyway.
to play outside, out in the woods until,
No,
until the
yeah,
bell
that's
rang
cool.
or whatever
I
called us in, and it was big thing to go playing out in the woods and
Yeah.
tag and stuff like that.
Sure, there were kids running around all out on
Yeah.
picnic day. They thought they'd send her off with a blast.
Last dude.
They would be in prison. This now.
Oh, well, I
if they
guess
did
so.
that, but That's the way it went. It was funny, but anyway.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Good old times. And I remember Paler's next door down here, Eddie's
Yeah.
folks, when old, what's Eddie's dad's name?
Freddie.
Fred. I remember yet, I knew better, and they told me, but you had to do things yourself to learn. I went and, if anybody ever stuck their tongue and put it on, in the winter time when it was real cold, and put it on the pump handle where we used to pump water, look out, your tongue was, you'd pull it back quick and all the skin on your tongue would rip off. Because you'd stick right to the pump handle. And there's no kid in our day that didn't try it at least once. But only once you try it.
That was part of the growing up process.
Part of the growing up.
Oh yeah, yeah. But to talk about hospitals, it was years ago. When you have a family of 4 or 5 kids, then all of a sudden you see in the paper all the kids were in the hospital. They all had their tonsils out all at the same time, or had their adenoids out.
Yep.
The whole
tonsils
family
dead,
would
right.
go. All the kids would go.
Yep.
You just had to get your tonsils out.
That was automatic.
Yeah, and your adenoids. I don't know if they still
Yeah.
have kids that have adenoids or not.
I don't know if they grow them yet or not. I don't know. But I remember old Doc, from Sturgeon Bay.
The German guy,
Yeah, you guys remember.
Mulhauser.
Mulhauser.
Yeah.
My wife never wanted to go there because she couldn't understand them.
Uh-huh.
She had a hard time understanding if we take the kids there.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I guess we had to take them someplace else. But he took my tonsils and adenoids out, and my sister's too. And the big building in town, right on the corner, but stop and go right there.
Yeah, that was Leeson Hospital.
Leeson Hospital, and that's where you went.
Yeah.
Oh boy, I can think of that yet, that ether mask going over your face. Wow.
he was the only doctor that would examine you that I knew while smoking a cigarette.
Yep.
He
I
always smoked
remember that.
cigarettes, and he could talk, and that cigarette
Hang right
ash.
down.
Yeah, that cigarette ash
Full
would
up.
just hang on that cigarette, And he was a German. He came right from
Yeah,
Germany.
I know
a
he
big,
came
heavy
from
guy.
Germany.
And he could talk, and he could look at you, and he'd say, "Well, how are you?" Well, he said, "I think you're pretty good shape. Your eyes certainly look good." He could tell by looking in your eyes whether or not you had anything or not. But he was an interesting guy, and he was right on the corner where that, right across from the post office, and his office is in there.
Yep.
Yep. Delivered the
was-
kids. My youngest daughter, she was hospital and everything was $120. Hospital, doctor, and the whole thing. Well, we're all farmers, and farmers are they've had ups and downs, and our cropping systems have changed and so on. But I remember when we used to have we always planted corn, had oats and hay usually, and corn was there was kind of a different way we planted corn years ago than we plant it today. You remember, Charlie, we used to plant it 36-inch rows, and
Yeah.
plants were long ways apart, and yeah.
Well, and then sometimes they would check row it, so when the corn
Uh-huh.
come up, it looked like it was a checkerboard effect in the cornfield, because they felt that the corn plant couldn't be squeezed that much.
No.
They had to have a lot of
of
sunshine
room.
and air and,
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
Today we were probably planting about 12,000 seeds to an acre. Today we're planting 30
30,000 seeds.
Yeah. or better.
Yeah.
And the corn business has changed from just mainly corn silage into cobs. Went through the corn pickers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Took the husks off, put the cobs in the granary, to combines and grain dryers that we don't monkey with that anymore. It's easier to handle, and it lends itself to mechanical harvesting and mechanical handling better. And the yield, of course, are more than doubled.
Yeah, more than doubled. Yeah.
The advent of we used to grow our own seed corn, but now they when everybody is using hybrid seed that you buy new seed every year, and it's scientifically developed to the point that you can only use certain weed sprays on it to kill the weeds and things like that. So. And in the last few years, we've seen a resurgence of wheat in the area. The market has become a little better. Many years ago, in the 1830s to 1860s, they planted a lot of wheat. But they felt that it took too much out of the soil, and the yields declined that much that they didn't feel it was worthwhile. And of course, all the stone picking, everything else was done by hand then. And you had to get every little marbled stone because it might go in the thrashing machine, and the guy that had the thrasher would raise heck with you.
Yeah. That we used to have that open pollinated corn.
Yeah.
And you get one hot day in July and it'd tossle out, and that would be the end of it. It couldn't stand the drought at all. But the corn is different, totally different, the way we raise it. And another reason that they had these crossroads, these check road, was you would cultivate it both ways.
Well, sure you.
That way you
For
could
wheat
get all the
control.
weeds. Yeah, but and the animal, the whole animal thing has changed. Where everybody had a herd of cows, and maybe their neighbor had a bull, and that every once in a while you see the farmer going down the road with this bull on the end of a rope, going to the neighbors, take care of the cows. But it seems that when artificial insemination came along, that changed the whole dairy industry, didn't it?
Well, yeah, it was equivalent to hybrid corn.
Yeah.
As far as production and everything else, improved so much in a short time.
Yeah.
It was equivalent to the hybrid corn that you just got more yield out of each cow.
Yeah, more yield, and farms got a few more cows. And then another big thing was when lake to lake dairy came into the neighborhood. That was a big blessing, because what it did then, it gave the farmers another market for their milk. They could end up having grade A milk, which brought a little premium, where you had to have things fixed up a little better for it. But this was the first opportunity since almost the beginning of dairying here, that there's been an opportunity for farmers to get a little premium on their milk. Otherwise, we were always a little bit behind on our price of our milk. You remember those old open milk trucks they used to have?
Oh yeah.
Art Weber used to have them. Art Weber used to come by with the chain stakes and with the chains
With
around.
the chains around, keep the cans from falling
milk
off.
cans, and then they'd freeze in the winter. Cow.
And get sour in the summer.
Sour in the summer, we'd have to put them in a water tank and stir the milk until it was cool.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's a good time.
That was then all of a sudden somebody got the idea to have a milk cooler.
Milk cooler,
Where you have the milk, put the cans in this box,
yeah.
turn the water on, and that cold water would flow over the cans.
Cool it.
And that was all right when you had 6 or 8 cans of milk, but when they got more production, that didn't work out so good.
My original experience with dairying was that we used to deliver milk to houses downtown.
Yeah, you did.
In quart or pint bottles, whatever it was, and we had a separator that you separated cream out and would sell it that way, and that meant every morning and every night when you got done milking, you still had to fill the bottles.
Yeah.
We had a bottle filler and everything, but somebody had to go around and put each one of those little paper caps on. That was usually my job. And then go out at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and deliver it downtown to the homes that had ordered it, and also to some of the little stores. There was a lot of little stores around town that we delivered to and things like that. But it was an early experience in modern dairying, or whatever you want to call it.
Did you have Did you have to pasteurize milk that time?
No, we quit when they passed the state law that you had to pasteurize. It was all raw milk.
Yeah.
And but we quit when they had to pasteurize because for our operation was not
Yeah.
financially feasible to go and buy the equipment.
You
to
had
do
all
it.
Guernseys in too, didn't you?
Yeah, it was Golden Guernsey milk.
Yeah.
Rolling
Yeah, I
Hill
can
Dairy.
That's
Remember,
right.
you used to bottle milk, and Fred Ashes used to
Yeah.
bottle milk, and Roy Marshall, now
Yeah.
in Sturgeon Bay. And did Fales
I
have a
don't
milk
think so.
I don't think they did.
bottler?
They may have sold a Plex, so.
Oh, I think
They
they did.
could've.
Yeah, yeah. And then after the milk trucks, they got modern. They put a little cab over them,
Yeah.
so you could keep the milk out of the sun. I think they were having some quality problems
Yeah,
after a
I
while
think so.
with some of that milk. It
Yeah.
would sit there a while, and I'm sure that every once in a while there'd be a can that had
Can
some
that was
sour
sour.
milk in it,
I'm sure of that.
and flies and everything else. I'm
Yeah, a
surprised
few
humanity
flies slip
survived.
through there. When you take the strainer, remember you guys used to take the old strainer and set her on the can in the barn behind the cows, and then you'd
Very
pour
well.
you'd milk in a pail, and then you'd dump it in the strainer, and you had the strainer pad in there that would take the dirt out. Well, it didn't, I don't know, there was usually sometimes an awful lot of dirt in there.
And the cats always like to eat those strainer
Yeah.
pots.
That wouldn't do them any good. Pretty
A lot
soon
of
you'd see
cats
it.
died from
Died.
constipation. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think so.
They were. That was a great thing. But then if the milk wouldn't run and the strainer just right, you slam her down on the
Yeah,
can.
she'd go through that.
You had to get it through.
Bang. Then you'd pour too much in, it would run over once in a while. The can, you
Yeah, but
couldn't
don't
even
forget the
watch it.
flies. There were a lot
The
of
can
flies.
would run over.
Oh my. Yeah, but that was pretty primitive. But you know, there was how many cheese factories do you think there were in Sevastopol at one time?
One up here.
Yeah.
This used to be at one time a cheese factory.
Yeah.
This was?
Yep. At one time, this was a cheese factory.
Is that right? I didn't know
Yep.
that.
On the corner here, they had the well there. That
I
supplied the
know the
cheese
folks
factory.
told me that there was a cheese factory here, but there's a cheese factory down on the corner
Yeah.
by the town line road.
Golden
and-
Glow, that was.
Yeah,
it was Golden
and there
Glow.
was one over by Tony Haynes
Tony Haynes, yep.
in,
There was one in the Institute
yeah,
on the end of that row of houses, that old stone house. That was but that was a big thing, you know.
Oh,
that
you bet.
then you'd milk and you'd just put the stuff on the buggy or whatever, and you'd just haul it over to the
Over to
cheese
the cheese
factory. And
that was part of it, was you didn't want to haul it too far. Or
yeah,
they were close enough that you could haul one way or the other with
Yeah.
the horse and
Yeah.
buggy or
Yeah.
whatever,
Wouldn't freeze.
and it would have time not to spoil.
yeah, yeah. It was a challenge to keep that
You
milk
bet.
fresh and
Yeah.
that people could use it. Of course, that's why cheese factories were so nice, because you could make it into cheese and you could store it
Right.
easily then. Of course, that dairy business, that kind of started up after the wheat business.
Yeah,
You know, there was a transition
Mhm.
in there where, like you say, the wheat, it wouldn't grow anymore.
Yeah.
They'd clear the fields and they'd plant wheat, no fertilizer or anything. But then if you get cows, well, then you've got the cow manure, you've got
yeah.
the fertility, and you've got the pastures and this sort of thing. And it fit in pretty good, but I don't know, a number of cows that are left in Door County right now, I don't think it would be anywhere near the total number that were here.
well, I know that, because all you gotta do is go down the mile length of road and there is no cows at all.
No, there's no cows at all. And the barns are all falling apart.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah,
you
you're
go
not
by
keeping them
and-
up.
You know, that's one thing I always kick out of these artists. They paint these pictures of these
Yeah.
old barns. Oh, isn't
Older the better.
that nice? And look at this lovely old barn. When I look at an old barn like that, all I think is hard work, no money, poverty,
Poverty.
yeah.
kids, a bunch of kids, and tough going. I mean, there's
That's
nothing
right.
romantic to me
No.
I
about
see
an
a
old barn.
failure of the system.
It's a it's a
actually
monument
failure
to,
of the
it's a
system.
monument to some bad times.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, you know, You know, I think, you know, we never talk a lot about it, but I think there was a lot of alcoholism back then in those days.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, because it wasn't in our family, your family so much, but I remember if you want to go and find a farmer, there's two places you could go. You could either go to his house. Chances are he wouldn't be there, but he would be down to the
Institute Country Tavern.
Institute. Sometime during the day, you'd find him
Yeah.
down there. But then when you guys had the National Inn, National Hotel, that was a kind of a
Sure.
interesting hangout too, wasn't it?
But I remember, oh yeah, it was. All the farmers would come down when they get their feed ground and that, they'd always come over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Get the
quite a
milk
thing
check
at
cashed.
that time. Yeah, get the milk chat and they go to the tavern. But I know up here at Institute, the neighbor right down here, Keen, Herman, and Lenny, the farmer right in the hollow next to us here, they'd go every morning at 9 o'clock. They'd go to the tavern up at Institute and have a couple beers and come back. And every noon, they'd go up to the tavern and have a couple beers. You could set your watch by it. Them guys, and everybody else was busy. We never could figure out how they could do that, but they did.
They got by.
They
yeah.
got by.
Yeah.
They made a living.
Yeah. Was
Yeah.
that Buck?
Yeah.
Was that Buck? Keen?
Carlton, Buck.
Carlton? Yeah.
But
yeah.
then there was Leonard. He was the older one.
Oh,
there was
yeah.
two boys,
Yeah. Okay.
and their
Yeah.
girl. There was a girl too, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, somewhere in between the wheat and the dairy business, there was a while where they raised peas for
Yeah. That
dry
was the other
peas
thing.
for like pea soup and stuff like that.
Yep.
That's where
Hard peas.
Reynolds brothers got
That's
their
right.
start,
That's right. They
Yeah.
did.
and that got went just like the wheat. They had the continuous crop for a little while, and all of a sudden they couldn't grow. It didn't grow,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
were running out of the fertilizer that they needed
Yeah.
with a continuous crop, and so
Yeah.
went to something else.
Yeah. That was something about, you know, there was no such thing as fertilizer back in them. No, who ever heard of fertilizer? You know,
No.
it just, this ground was kind of poor to begin with
Yeah.
and shallow. And so it was just kind of, it was a struggle in Door County. People, like you say, your grandpa lived up in northern Door County. And it's right. I mean, there 50% of the ground
Stones.
was stone.
Yep.
Around here it was probably only 10%.
Yeah.
But,
My grandmother used to say you could park a wagon in the middle of the field and fill the wagon without ever moving.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's some reason why all those stone fences are still around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them. You go up north and
Oh yeah.
there's a
Well,
lot of
there's a
those
lot
stone
of them around
fences.
here too.
Yeah, and you know that every one of those things had to be picked off the field and moved and thrown in a pile.
And
Yeah,
piled.
a lot
Many
of work.
cases it's piled
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you
stacked.
had to make a wall outside it so
Yeah.
that you could throw the rest
Throw
in the
'em
middle.
inside.
And you couldn't throw them on your neighbor's side because
No, he
he
didn't
He
like
hollered
that.
like heck.
He was right there. He was right there to.
And I remember every Saturday, that was stone picking day because
Yep.
we were home from school. And Pa, he'd always pick stones on Saturday.
Hmm.
That was the main,
That was the main
he had
thing.
the kids there to pick stones.
Yeah. Well,
And then one of the women would drive, my ma would drive the tractor real slow and we'd pick stones.
walk along and pick stones.
Walk along
Yeah,
and
get
pick
a crew in.
stones,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was that was about that time you were
Every
deciding
Saturday.
whether you wanted to farm or not.
Yeah. Then I remember when Pa had the farm, all of a sudden he decided he bought a boat, and I remember the first time, that was quite a few years ago, he said, from now on we're never going to work on Saturday afternoon. We're going to take Saturday afternoon off. And
Good.
by God we did.
Good
When
for you.
Saturday afternoon came, that was it. He'd bring the boat out, we'd wash it, or we'd go fishing or someplace.
Yeah,
But we didn't work no more Saturday afternoons.
yeah,
And that was quite different.
yeah. That was
I'll
pretty
tell you,
nice
that
of
was-
them to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a good thing. We had a little bit time off for ourselves.
When did you quit farming? You had the farm over here on Matthew Road, and then you had what we call the Bruckner farm. But then, did you go from the Bruckner farm to the mill?
Yeah,
You went to
yeah,
the mill.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sold the Bruckner farm and then we went to the mill, bought
Yeah.
the Mill Supper Club, yeah. That was in 1963.
Oh, Okay.
Remember, my
And
dad
then-
bought it in '63.
Didn't your grandpa or somebody have the Institute bar at one time too?
Yeah, and the Velmy bar too.
Oh, really?
Yep,
I
I got a
didn't know.
picture of Dad standing on the front porch of the old Velmy bar.
Yeah, happy hour.
Yep, happy hour. Yeah.
Yeah. An Institute
And I got a
bar.
picture in the Institute of the old Leist old lumber mill there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Amylase.
yeah, old Emil Leist lumber mill.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, the
but-
neighborhood, again, with the dairy business coming in, neighborhood, there was more kids.
Yeah,
You know,
Oh.
if you, I can remember skating parties down on the pond down here and,
Yeah.
and things like that, and
yeah,
going skiing on Bruckner's Hill and getting together during the summer with the Bruckner boys
yeah.
to play. Now there is nobody for young people to go back and
No.
forth without somebody loading them in a car and taking them someplace.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, we all had kids in the neighborhood to play with.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh,
There would be
yes.
probably within a half a mile of your place or the adjoining farms,
Sure.
there'd be a dozen kids that could get together and
Yeah.
for stuff. But now, of course, and that's what happened to the schools and all of these things,
Of course.
churches.
Sure,
The people are just moving away. We're built,
yeah,
all these things we built for all of those people. Now the people are gone, and the families are smaller. But I mean, it wasn't. It was strange for my case. I was the only kid, but a lot of these families had 6, 8 kids,
Mhm.
and and of course they had to have them for help with the farming and all that kind of stuff. And there wasn't a lot of juvenile delinquency then either.
No, because
no.
there wasn't a lot of days off if
There was
it
no
wasn't
days
raining.
oh, there was no time to. No time
you were
to
hoeing corn or you were
doing something.
Hoeing
milking
potatoes.
cows or helping with this or
Hoeing
helping with that.
potatoes.
Yeah, they always
Yeah.
found a job for the kids, that's
oh
for sure.
man.
Yeah, I think it was you look back at it, all people talk about maybe we missed a lot of things, but I think that there were a lot of things that people missed if they weren't here. I
Yeah.
mean, it was a way of life. It
Yeah.
was it wasn't complicated. You had friends and you had a lot of kids to play with and you had a lot of work and you learned responsibilities early in your life. And I think that's something that a lot of kids today could stand a couple of years on the old farm to find out just what life is all about,
Well,
Yeah.
you learned life lessons the hard, natural way.
Yeah. I mean, and not only that, but they were hard times.
Oh, yeah.
They were
You
hard
bet
times.
it was tough.
I mean, there wasn't a lot of money around. I think everybody was poor, more or less.
Yeah,
I remember a story about some guy went up to Egg Harbor one time. They had a feed mill up there, and was in the Depression, and he had a $20 bill in his pocket. And he couldn't get that $20 bill changed anywhere in Egg Harbor. Nobody could change it. No, nobody could make change for a $20 bill. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think it's pretty typical because there just wasn't the money.
No, there
wasn't
was
the
no
money.
money around.
And everybody was kind of in the same boat, and once in a while you get a lucky break. And like the year when the cherries were good, we ended up having a little money. But
Then you always put it away for that bad year, or else you
For the
bad
bought
year,
some
yeah.
machinery or bought
Yeah.
something ahead
Yeah.
that you wouldn't have to buy it during the bad
Yeah.
year and
Yeah.
things like that.
yeah, you could buy a pretty darn nice farm for $10,000.
Yeah.
I mean, completely equipped, ready to go.
that time I think we paid $25,000 for the old Hasenjager place next door, that old
Isn't
farm.
that something?
25,000, and he was mad because his brother-in-law or his father-in-law sold him that farm. Yeah, he was mad because his father-in-law sold his farm. He thought he charged him too much. I guess he took $500 for
Yeah.
his fee
Yeah.
for finding
Yeah.
finding a buyer, which was my
Yeah.
dad at that time.
Yeah, there was a lot of cases like that. When the price of land started going up, a lot of the folks on the farm didn't know the price of land was going up.
Yeah.
And not that there was any unscrupulous realtors, but there were folks that took advantage of that. So they'd come around to these people and say, look,
Yeah.
you got the farm here, you've been here all your life, I'll give you $10,000 for it. I mean, cash, right now.
Yep.
Well, that guy that owned that farm had never seen $10,000 in one
Cool.
piece in his life.
Never.
So he jumped on it. The problem was the guy that bought the farm, he knew that there was somebody out there somewhere that was going to pay 15 for it.
Yep.
And he
Yep.
pocketed money. It wasn't really, but it happened. It happened a lot there, particularly in that year, in those years when real estate values begin to go up kind of fast. People, they didn't know, they paid, you buy a farm, you pay 10,000 or whatever you paid for the farm. And then you everything that you owned was in that farm. The idea was then to sell the farm, take the money, and move to town
And moved to town, retired.
and retire
Yep.
on whatever that farm had.
Brought
Well,
that up.
you know, now I get the point that it takes more to, well, you can't sell farmland actually. But I remember a lot of those old farmers, they'd work hard all their life, you know,
Yeah.
and think, man, someday I'm gonna retire and go to town. They didn't live 2 years.
No, no.
Because all of a sudden, they go from working
They didn't
to
have
doing
anything
nothing.
to do.
Nothing to do, and
Nothing to do.
they
They
were
were gone,
beside
no time.
themselves.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
and you, I don't know, there was several deals that I passed up to buying extra land that I probably could have used and stuff like that. And I bought that 80 from your grandpa, and he gave me a real deal on it, $7,500
I
for
was-
that 80
For
acres.
80 acres.
I was telling Janice.
4% interest.
Yep.
Yeah,
I was telling Janice the other day, I says, I think Chuck's dad paid, or Chuck, you bought it, paid, I thought, at $8,000. And now I know Grandpa asked,
And he offered me that other place down here with the barn and everything else, and the house and everything, for the same price. But I didn't have the money.
yeah,
well, at that
Yeah.
time he told Dad, and Dad had just sold the farm, I think, that time. And he told Dad, he says, if you want that farm over there across the road, he says, you give me $5,000 and you can have it. I says, Dad, we farmed enough, things were tough enough, we don't want no damn farm. So we didn't buy it, that was 80 acres.
yeah, yeah.
Well, just
it
to
seems quite a
illustrate that,
change.
there was just 20 acres right next door here that was sold for $140,000
Yeah,
for 20 acres.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I would have had the guts to go and borrow a bunch of money and
Yeah.
get into it, I could have made a lot of money. But
Yeah, you
I'm
could've-
just a poor farmer.
Yeah,
But the kids, when they were brought up on the farm, and went to a school, they were well rounded out. They knew pretty much everything.
the farm
And I
kid
said,
was pretty well.
Believe me, I said they knew they didn't have to go find out for themselves. They got their education when they went out in the barn
Yeah,
because there was more out there.
yeah, there was more,
See,
they had to figure things out.
They had to figure out things,
Yeah,
and
how
I
to do
never, for as long as I live, will never forget. My wife and I were up at the tavern that time, working for my dad, helping him in the supper club and the mill, and we left Lynn home, and our daughter, and she was small that time, and she had rabbits, and she called up on the phone. She called to my wife. She wanted to talk to her mother, and well, her mother didn't know what she wanted. Answered the phone, and I remember our daughter Lynn saying, "Mom, Browner had babies." Here she thought Browner was having babies. Here she was a boy rabbit, and he was having babies.
Something
So
got
they
screwed up.
got their education from the farm.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was great. And then as the tractors came and the horses, they disappeared.
Yeah.
That was, I remember the Ford tractor, that
Fordson.
little Ford that came, the Ford Ferguson.
Fordson came too at that time.
Fordson came.
Steel wheels.
Yeah, and then the Ford tractor came.
Yeah.
And when the Ford tractor came, more horses hit the Fox farm
Oh,
because
yeah.
they could. It was such a nice little tractor. You get the plow. You get the whole thing for $800.
Yeah.
You know, and you turn it off at night, and you didn't have to feed it hay and clean out behind it.
That's right.
Fix the harnesses. Yeah, that was quite a change when that came. The first tractors that came, and that little Ford Ferguson, and there's still some of them around.
Still some around.
You can imagine 50 years or more.
Yeah.
And,
They're worth more now than they were
When
then.
they were new, yeah, and
about
years ago.
$3,000 for
Yeah.
a used one now.
You
Yeah.
could buy a tractor and a plow for $800.
Isn't that something?
would had headlights on it and
Yeah.
a self-starter.
Yeah.
You know, what more could a person ask for?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I
Okay,
remember.
well, I guess this is about the time we're gonna have to wrap it up. It's been kind of fun here, chatting about old times and the things that we saw, and I hope the folks that are watching this enjoyed as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. But there are so many memories that we have on what life was like and how the changes have taken place that you just can't imagine having lived back at that time. If somebody would have picked you up and taken you out of here in about 1930s and brought you back in 1990 or 2000, you would say this isn't the same place. You might see some old buildings around, but it's not the same place at all. It's totally, totally different. But people move into the community and think, oh, it's always been like this. Well, it hasn't always been like this. It's like it is now. It was different, a lot different. People were
One thing
different.
certain is that change will always happen, and never anything's going to stay the same.
No,
Nope.
no, that's one thing we can be sure of. Things are going to change.
Yeah.
Yep. It's kind of fun to be able to look back at some of those things. And they're kind of funny now when we talk about them, but they
Kinda
were funny
forget
back
about
then
'em.
because we had a lot of problems, well, we lived through it.
Lived through it.
Yep.
I
And
wouldn't
you'll-
trade my experience for anything.
No,
No.
I wouldn't either.
No, I wouldn't
No.
either.
I think we grew up, in one of the best possible times that kids could grow up. From what we saw when we were little to what we see today, I think we grew up in the best possible time in this country's history. And maybe what's coming in the future, we don't know, but
Yeah.
so anyway, thank you.